So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So I am not going to go through this one by one and read all these things. You can read them just as well as I can, but we're going to go ahead and cover a number of areas that I think are important to cloud security. I want to be clear that we're not going to be able to talk about every single thing there is in security, because we could spend weeks or months talking about all the things about security. So we'll talk about some important things in the cloud, some highlights as you think about managing your clouds, or the first things and the most important things you should be thinking about in that space. Then we'll, I'll wrap up with sort of some top priorities at the end. And I'm going to apologize. If I see your question in the chat, I will try and get to it as appropriate. But I have a pretty small chat window here, so if you put a question in chat, I may not see it, and I apologize for that. So we want to start. The starting place for moving to the cloud, obviously, is to prepare. So the very first thing you want to do is think about what you're going to do and make a plan. And so let's talk a little bit about what that plan is going to look like. So first of all, I would strongly encourage you to reduce the complexity of your environment before you start moving to the cloud. And what do I mean by that? So I would start by evaluating your technology landscape. If you have not looked at your enterprise architecture, now is a very good time to understand your overall enterprise architecture. You may start with the idea that I want to move one particular thing to the cloud, or you may be starting with a mandate that says, I'm going to completely move all of my applications and services to the extent possible to the cloud, regardless of what your scope of moving to the cloud is. Or maybe you're, and some of you may already be there. We're going to move rapidly into that space. But let's assume you still have some movement to do, whether it's you're at the beginning, middle, or the end of that journey. It's incredibly important, regardless, to understand your enterprise architecture. So you really want to document what applications you have, what your interconnections of your various applications are, what all the services you're running are, so you can understand the landscape that you're trying to move. And then when you do that, the most important thing is to understand, one of the important things to understand is where you have duplicative applications. Do you have 5 or 6 email applications? Do you have 3 or 4 low-code applications? Do you have multiple identity tools and methodologies? So understanding those and simplifying your environment before you move will make that move to the cloud much simpler. It will also save you a lot of money in terms of your ability to support lots of tools, right? If you have multiple tools doing the same thing, going to one vendor, you can get a better deal with that one vendor. It also reduces your complexity and your overall cost. So be thinking about that before you move to the cloud. And then think about what your interfaces look like. Can you simplify your interface structure before you move to the cloud? It's modular. Applications are our future. That is the best way to be operating modular applications versus large monolithic applications that are hard to understand. But that means lots of interfaces between your applications, lots of microservices. So can you make those processes simpler? Can you, again, by reducing the number of vendors, you may be able to reduce your interfaces and simplify your system that's moving. So think hard about what complexity you have and how much you can reduce that complexity before it goes to the cloud. The next thing you need to be thinking about then is how you're going to move to the cloud, right? What's the complexity of the solution in the cloud? For sure, the simplest way to begin the cloud is in a software as a service solution. So if the option exists for you to go to software as a service in your cloud, that's what you want to do. Because you've got a shared responsibility with your vendor, and we'll talk more about shared responsibility later in this presentation. But in that shared responsibility, SaaS has the most clearly delineated set of responsibilities. What your vendor owns, what you own, it's much clearer in SaaS, and it's much easier to manage a SaaS solution. Now, it's not always possible. Sometimes you simply can't buy what you need. I worked for the U.S. government for a while. There are a number of things, particularly when I was at the EPA, where we were essentially a customer of one. We were the only customer for that product or service. And so we had to build that ourselves or have someone build it for us. And in that case, you're not going to find a SaaS product. You're going to have to move to the cloud with your homegrown application, or maybe you've got a product that is COTS and there's not a SaaS version. You need to move that to the cloud. So maybe you're going to have a platform as a service or even infrastructure as a service. But wherever possible, you want to move to that SaaS solution.